Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Badger's Talks Live, an online version of UW's face-to-face Badger Talks program. The Badger Talks program features over 350 former and current UW faculty and staff, and we give talks all around the state of Wisconsin. And today I'm going to do it online for you. And my name is Pelin Kesebir, and I'm excited to be talking to you about cultivating a healthy mind today. Our program is set for about 40 minutes, and I'm planning to present for 30 minutes, and then the rest of the time I will be able, if I'm able, I will be answering your questions. Okay, so let's get started with how we can cultivate our minds in challenging times. Of course, cultivating a healthy mind is relevant to challenging times, but there has never been a time when cultivating a healthy mind has not been important. I work at the Center for Healthy Minds as an assistant scientist, and at the Center for Healthy Minds, one of our main missions is to help people cultivate healthy minds, and we do that through trying to understand scientifically how we can do that. So without further ado, our first question is, how can we cultivate a healthy mind? But even before that, why do we want to cultivate a healthy mind? So do we need to cultivate a healthy mind? Why do we want a healthy mind? Well, I would say that we do want to cultivate a healthy mind, and it's because a healthy mind is a crucial ingredient of happiness, of enduring happiness. I think that we are not automatically inclined to think of happiness in terms of a healthy mind. Oftentimes, when we think of happiness, I believe it's something along the lines of this: if only I could have everything I want and get rid of everything I don't want, then I would be happy. So oftentimes our automatic inclination is to think of happiness as the fulfillment of our desires. I think this is very understandable. This is very human. But it seems to be is somewhat of a misunderstanding about the nature of happiness. Why am I saying that? Well, first of all, it's just impossible that the universe will always fulfill our desires. At the very least, there is suffering, there is illness, there is death. There are some things that we would never wish upon ourselves or our loved ones. Right? So because of that, when we think of happiness in terms of the fulfillment of our desires, we are almost setting us up for failure from the outset. And also, if we think of happiness in this way, then we are constantly trying to reach certain goals. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. But we are reaching for the next goal, and then the next one, and the next one, and then we are living our lives in a constant state of tension, and in a way that can be summarized as like, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if, right? I'll be happy when I graduate. I'll be happy when I find a job. I'll be happy when I get married. I'll be happy when I get a promotion. And again, this is a very understandable human instinct. Even now, I believe many of us think about, if only everything went back to normal, right? Then we would be happy. And again, although it's very understandable, it also doesn't allow us to be happy constantly and more enduringly. So because of that, I would argue that it's much more constructive to think of happiness not as a destination to arrive at, but rather as a manner of traveling. And a crucial ingredient of being the kind of traveler who will enjoy this travel is having a healthy mind, Now, I would argue that having a healthy mind is where enduring well-being lies. Not many of us think of happiness in this way. Again, like if a genie came to you, willing to grant you like 3 wishes so that you would become happy, I don't think many of us would say we want a healthy mind. But it truly is crucial to well-being, and that is because regardless of our external circumstances, it comes down to how our mind processes it, right? Our frame of mind determines how we relate and respond to the world. And what decades of well-being research has shown is that external circumstances account for a fairly small amount of happiness differences between people. So between 10 to 15% of happiness differences between people have been attributed to differences in external circumstances such as, for example, how much money you make, or where you live, or whether you are married or not, if you have kids or not. All of these seem to play a smaller role in our well-being than what we think. And I should note that if there are some extreme circumstances, like if you live in a war zone, if you are dealing with the most extreme kinds of adversity, then definitely external circumstances account for a higher percentage of your well-being. But again, under more normal circumstances, it does not matter as much. And why is that? Again, it's because it's our minds. Our minds function like a filter through which we just perceive whatever circumstances we have through the filters of our minds. And sometimes, just like in this example that we see, we might have something that is objectively good, like look at this little girl who came in first on sports day. She came in first, but apparently she is very sad and she is looking covetously at the little guy who came in third, who couldn't be happier, right? Apparently, this little girl, her mom posted this online. She wanted the green sign, the third sign is in green, whereas her own sign is, I understand it was in blue, and she wanted the green one. That's why she was so unhappy. So what this is it shows us that objective circumstances matter less than how we perceive those external circumstances. And research too shows us that personality differences in how we perceive the world, how we relate to the world, how we respond to the world, they account for 60 to 65% of happiness differences between people. So what we see here, and again, what decades of research has shown us, is that well-being, enduring well-being, is something that springs up more inside ourselves. It's something that happens inside ourselves, and I would argue that a healthy mind is what makes the biggest difference. Okay, then our next question is, what is a healthy mind, or what are some components of a healthy mind? Of course, a lot can be said about that, but today, because I have such a limited amount of time, I want to talk about two important properties of a healthy mind. So a healthy mind, as we will see, is a function of attention and interpretation, a function of what we attend to, and then how we interpret the things that we attend to. Okay, let's start with attention. Now, attention and well-being are inextricably related. Why? Well, because attention functions like a spotlight. A lot of things can be going on in your world, in your personal life, in the outside world, but if you do not pay attention to them, they will not be a part of your reality. Attention is like a spotlight, and what it illuminates, it streams into our minds and becomes our reality. And of course, because our attention determines our reality, it has a direct effect on our happiness. Things that we don't pay attention to, they don't have the power to influence our happiness or our well-being. Okay, then what do we observe when we study people, like happy people, less happy people, and we look at the differences between them in terms of their attention? What do we observe? Well, a very interesting line of research has shown that when people look at images like this, in eye tracking studies, for example, when their eyes are being tracked with a machine, what they find is that participants who tend to be more anxious, they are much faster at detecting the negative stimulus. Here it's the face with a fearful expression. In a sea of neutral expression, this face with the fearful expression, it is what the eyes of more anxious people automatically orients to. Similarly, these people are also having a harder time to detect this image of a neutral face in this sea of fearful expressions, because they cannot disengage from the negative information. They cannot disengage from the negative stimuli and find a neutral place. So there are several studies like this that show us that the attention of less happy people, or people who suffer from depression or anxiety, it is oriented more towards negative stimuli and less oriented toward positive stimuli. Other studies too show us very clearly that there is a strong relation between attention and well-being. And it's fair to say that developing greater control over our attention is foundational to reshaping our minds and improving our well-being. You might have also heard the expression that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. Distracted people, typically they report like chronically distracted or easily distracted people, they typically report lower levels of well-being. Of course, there's good news. We can train our attention. We can train our attention to be more oriented towards the positive and less oriented towards negative stimuli. How can this be accomplished? Well, there are attention trainings, psychologists do that, and then there is also, of course, meditation, mindfulness meditation, or other types of meditation that have been shown to improve attention, and that have shown that people's attention can be oriented more towards the positive. One thing that we can, of course, do on our own if we want to orient our attention more towards the positive is just having the intention to have our radar out for the positive, have our radar out for the positive. So here, what we want to do is to notice what is positive out there. You might have heard that gratitude and happiness are very closely related. Actually, one of the biggest predictors of well-being or happiness, it turns out, is gratitude. And there are many studies that show that gratitude interventions, for example, where you keep a gratitude journal, like the one here, that help people to feel better. And so why do these interventions work, or why is gratitude so powerful in making us feel better? Well, because gratitude is all about noticing the positive, noticing what is going right. They say that our minds are like Velcro for the negative and like Teflon for the positive. And with gratitude, what we are doing is training our mind to be a little bit more like Velcro for the positive. Okay. Another related way in which we can train ourselves to attend to the positive is make an effort to appreciate the ordinary, appreciate the ordinary. So here I want to give the example of Helen Keller, and maybe some of you have heard of this essay that she published in the Atlantic Monthly in January 1933. It's this essay called 3 Days to See. I would encourage you to Google it, to look for it. It's a very touching essay about what she would do if she had 3 days to see. As you know, she was deaf and blind from a very, very young age on. And in this article or essay, she talks about how, for example, on the first day, if she could see, she would look at the faces of the people she loves, like her teacher, her friends. And then on the second day, she would go to the streets of New York. She would go to the museums and so on. And somewhere in this essay, she talks about how oftentimes when she asks her seeing friends what they have noticed, for example, when they go out on a walk, they say something to the effect of, nothing in particular. And then she writes this: how was it possible, I asked myself, to walk for an hour through the woods and see nothing worthy of note? So this is in response to a friend who came back from a long walk in the woods, and when she asked her, what did you see? She said nothing in particular. And she goes on saying, I who cannot see find hundreds of things to interest me through mere touch. I feel the delicate symmetry of a leaf. I pass my hands lovingly about the smooth skin of a silver birch. And she goes on like this. And then, interestingly, she says, if I were the president of a university, I should establish a compulsory course in how to use your eyes. The professor would try to show his pupils how they could add joy to their lives by seeing what passes unnoticed before them. And then maybe the most touching part of this essay, she says, I who am blind, I can give you one hint. Look as if tomorrow you will be blind. Listen to music, listen to the song of birds as if tomorrow you will become deaf. So just use your senses as if, all your senses, as if you will lose them tomorrow. This is really powerful because it addresses our almost endless capacity to take things for granted. As humans, we really just have this thing called taking for granted, right? We do not appreciate things oftentimes unless we are faced with the threat of losing them. And I think the times that we are currently going through have been a very powerful reminder of this. Many things that we took for granted, that we didn't even think about twice, have become now impossible to do. And they say, appreciate little things, because one day may come when you will look back and realize those were actually the big things. And my personal belief is that one thing that will hopefully come out of these challenging times that we are going through, it will be that we will have a renewed sense of appreciating the ordinary, and it is something that can really orient us towards the positive, and we should really have the intention to do that. And even now, even when many of us, if we have the luxury, we are at home, to the extent that we can, just appreciate the little things. If you can sip a cup of tea, or you can talk to the ones, to people you love, all of these are things to be appreciated. Okay. So I've been talking about the power of attention, and about how we can train ourselves towards noticing the positive. But what about the negative? What about the negative? Now, one thing I want to say is that negative stuff, just as negative emotions, are a part of life. And we, under no circumstances, are advocating a kind of happiness that is devoid from reality, or that is divorced from the hard parts of reality. That kind of a well-being would be fragile anyway. So it is important to pay attention to the negative, and it is natural to feel negative emotions. And especially during times like this, obviously we will suffer and we will experience grief and all sorts of other emotions. But still, if we pay attention to a couple things in our relationship to the negative, it might help us. It might help us. And to illustrate those, I want to give the example of the news, because oftentimes the negative, like one of the biggest sources of negative in our lives is the news, right? Be it traditional media or social media. As you can see from this old New Yorker cartoon, like, my desire to be well informed is currently at odds with my desire to remain sane. I believe that there has hardly been a time in the history of humanity when news weren't just disheartening, right? And also that's because that news are mostly about things that go wrong, right? And it is important to know about the things that go wrong, and it is our duty to do our best to fix all that is wrong, to the extent that is possible for us. But still, it is also very much a reality that the news are a constant source of stress and sometimes even despair for a lot of people. So what can we do to change that? Now, a lot of experts who studied this, first of all, would recommend that we limit our exposure to the news. And this, you might have heard this recommendation again from many experts when it comes to the COVID virus. Why do they recommend it? Well, it's because like a really a powerful recipe for misery is paying our attention too much on things over which we have no control. So we need, as humans, we do need to feel some sense of control in life. And if we focus too much on things that are outside of our sphere of influence, it is gonna impact us negatively. So that is one of the main reasons why it's important to limit our exposure to the negative. But another important reason too is that oftentimes the news of the day miss the what can be only called the big picture, and the big picture is really that a lot of things in this world, regardless of how things might look today, or how they looked last week, or they will look next week, things are going in the right direction. So scholars, just like Hans Rosling here in this book, or other scholars like Steven Pinker or Max Roser, they have argued that we are actually living in maybe the best times of history, right? So, for example, Hans Rosling, he has in his book, he has all these graphs about how many things that are bad have been decreasing, like slavery or oil spills or plane crash deaths or many other things. And similarly, a lot of good things have been on the increase. And again, if a genie came to you with a magic wand asking you, like, in what time of history would you like to live? If you care about living a long and comfortable life, it would be a gamble to say to give any time period other than now, right? You could be a king or a queen in the Middle Ages, yet not have the comforts and the knowledge, obviously, of what we have today. So this is really important to keep in mind. I emphasize this not to dismiss, again, what's wrong today, a lot of things that are, again, that need to be fixed. But if we have this bigger picture in mind, if we have this perspective, it's easier to find hope, right? Yes, there are many things that are, that, like, we have many serious problems in life, but people who came before us had it even worse, but they still worked hard and made it possible for us to live better lives, and we can do the same if we do not lose hope for our grandchildren and their grandchildren. Okay, so I've talked quite a bit about attention and the importance of attention, but now I want to also talk about the importance of interpretation. Now, it has been said that to different minds, the same world is a hell and a heaven. And it is very, very true. Oftentimes, the world is like an optical illusion, and there are, like, some people see one thing, some people will see another thing. So this is an optic illusion. I'm sure, again, many of you have seen this before. It's an old German illustration. It's known as the "my wife and my mother-in-law" illustration. And what we learn from research is that when looking at an illusion like that one, or basically when they are interpreting any event, there's a difference between happy people and unhappy people. So we know that happy people perceive and interpret the same events in more positive ways than unhappy people do. And there have been several studies that show that. So in one study, for example, researchers asked college students to list one positive and one negative event that they experienced during last month. And then researchers who were blind to the study hypothesis, they evaluated these events in terms of how positive or how negative they appeared to them, right? And what they found was that to an outside eye, to somebody who doesn't know these people, like the events that the happy people and the unhappy people listed, they did not seem different in terms of their positive or negative valence, right? But these people, like happy people, they seem to find the positive events more happiness inducing, and on the flip side, unhappy people, they seem to find negative events much more unhappiness inducing than the opposite group. So in one study, for example, in the same paper, the researchers asked the participants, okay, imagine you are sitting at home and looking out the window. So they gave them, the participants, a scenario, and there are positive scenarios, negative scenarios, and also a neutral scenario. And in this scenario, they looked at how positively or negatively the participants evaluated these scenarios. And in this scenario, they also asked them to just just write down, like, what they would be feeling, what they would be doing or feeling. And then I want to show you, for illustration purposes, examples given by one unhappy and one happy participant. So one participant wrote, "I am lonely, waiting for someone or something, feeling like I should be more involved." And then the other participant writes, "It's a beautiful sunny day. I realize how lucky I am to be alive, to enjoy to this day. I feel happy, fortunate." And of course, it's easy to guess which one comes from the happy and which one comes from the unhappy participant, right? So again, the important thing here is to realize that the same event is perceived in a way that is more happiness inducing by happy people and as more unhappiness inducing by unhappy people. Okay, I am realizing that it's already 30 minutes, so I have a little bit more. Maybe we will have a little less time for questions, but I want to continue and tell you a little bit more about the power of positivity and interpretation. Um, and what I want to show is one of my favorite studies, one of my favorite scales in the whole field of positive psychology. And this one is actually old, but it has recently been studied by other people. So it's this questionnaire called Mutual Object Satisfaction Questionnaire. It's also known as the Gripe Index. And the idea is very simple. You give people certain things, like the city in which you live, or local newspapers, or your first name, and then you ask people, okay, how satisfied are you with these things? And what you find very interestingly is that people who express higher satisfaction with these things, they also report in general more positive emotions. They report higher life satisfaction. They also report higher satisfaction with their jobs. And like, what I think is really interesting here is that some of these things are incredibly ordinary or just even trivial. Like, my favorite is this, like letter sized paper, right? So whether or not you are satisfied with letter sized paper, it tells us how happy you are as a human being overall, right? And this brings us to the idea that it seems that certain people, they just have this trait called positivity, and they just seem things almost through some magic glasses that make things look better to them. So the same things, the same events, the same letter size paper, it looks better to people who have this dispositional tendency to be happy than people who don't have that. So, yes, positivity, this pervasive mode of appraising, viewing, and perceiving life from a positive stance, it is crucial to well-being. People who are high on positivity, they also see themselves in a more positive light, so you get higher self-esteem. They see the future in more positive terms, so you get higher optimism and hope. And they also see other people in a more positive light, so you get better relationships. So all in all, positivity is crucial to well-being. Now, what if we don't have much of positivity? What if you look at these examples and, maybe you are the one who would be dissatisfied with everything on the list, or maybe, you look the person looking at the window and you again have like lots of negative scenarios coming up in your mind. Is there no hope for you? Well, there's definitely hope for you. So positivity is definitely something that can be learned, because it's, again, the neuroplasticity of our minds. By doing things intentionally, by changing some habits of our minds, we can become more positive, and we should. As they say, as the old joke goes, no sense in being pessimistic, it wouldn't work anyway, right? So how can we practice positivity then? What can we do to be more positive? Well, the way that all positivity cultivating techniques work is really exercising our or training our brains to interpret the world with a more charitable perspective, So what would be some examples of this? So, for example, finding the silver lining in things. It's old, it's cliche for some of you maybe, but it is incredibly powerful. Just trying to find the positive things, and if you look for them, you will find them. Even in the worst circumstances, there are little things that can be found, or like some meaning, some value that you can take away from even the worst circumstances. That would be a silver lining. And then, for example, identifying the doors that have opened as a result of the doors that have closed, right? again, that is how life works. What we think is a horrible ending sometimes turns out to be a great beginning, right? And how can we identify those? Again, just put on those positivity lenses and think about how would a positive person think about it if it doesn't come to you naturally. And then one of the most powerful ones that I would recommend is always thinking about how it could have been worse, how it could have been worse. And you will notice that people who are naturally optimistic, they do that automatically. Their mind automatically goes to, oh yeah, like this is bad, but like it could be so much worse, right? An example that I really like comes from a British professor called Richard Wiseman. Richard Wiseman, among other things, he studied people who consider themselves lucky. And one of his main findings is that positive people, virtually all positive people, they describe themselves as lucky. And in one of his studies, he asked his participants, those who describe themselves as lucky and as unlucky, he asked them, okay, imagine you are in a bank waiting in line, and then suddenly a robbery occurs and you get shot in the arm. And so what would you think? Would you think that you are lucky, or would you think you are unlucky? Like what would be your thoughts? And what he finds fascinatingly is that the people who describe themselves as unlucky, they say things like, well, it's horrible. It's, of course, it's very, very unlucky. It's just bad, and it would only happen to me, right? They say things like that. But what about the lucky people who describe themselves as lucky? Well, they say things like this: well, I would think that I'm lucky because I did not get shot in the head, right? And they would add something like, and now I can sell this story to the newspaper and make some money, right? So which perspective is right? So I can see, like, both of these people, I believe, are justified in thinking what they do. But which of these mindsets leads to a better outcome? Well, the positive one does, right? So it's really important to practice this idea of interpreting the world in a more charitable manner. And the trick is to realize that the way we see the world is not always, it's not the only way to see the world, right? Just as with the other optical illusion we saw, and now this one, so you might be seeing evil now, but if you look carefully, you can also see good, right? So good and evil. So we think that the way we think about something is usually the only way, the way we perceive something is the only way, but it's not true. We can perceive things in a way that makes us even slightly happier, and we just have to put the intention there. Okay, so I've talked about attention, and I've talked about interpretation, and what I would finish with is three very fast tips, additional tips for a healthy mind. So the first one is very, very important. Take good care of your body, because our minds and our bodies are the same system. It becomes impossible to regulate our attention or regulate our emotions if our body is not in its optimal state. And then cultivating healthy relationships is also crucial, because our minds, they need other people. Sometimes when it's really hard for ourselves to regulate, again, our emotions, we do need the support from other people. So it's important to cultivate healthy relationships with other, of course, healthy people, right? People who can also help us to regulate ourselves. And then the last thing, last but not least, one tool that can be very helpful, very effective in training ourselves to regulate our attention better and to interpret things in a more charitable manner, that's mindfulness. Mindfulness, it relates to paying attention to the present moment with an attitude of kindness and acceptance and curiosity. And there are many studies that show the effectiveness of mindfulness. And of course, our center is very much involved. The Center for Healthy Minds at UW-Madison is very much involved in these studies. And the last thing I will offer to you is actually one tool that can both help you cultivate mindfulness, but also other components of a healthy mind. And that is an app that has been developed by Healthy Minds Innovations, which is a non-profit affiliate of our center. So there's this app called Healthy Minds Program, which is freely available. For individuals, and it's a wonderful program if you want to, if you don't know where to start, how to cultivate a healthy mind. And so yeah, you could just go to an app store, or you could go to tryhealthyminds.org. And I will stop here. I thank you so much for being here. And I thank the Badger Talks Live for giving me this opportunity. So if you have any questions, you can email me. I didn't have any time for questions. I apologize, but please contact me through other manners if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Stay well, be well. Bye.